Your monthly subscription box from postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. The Zonker is a tried and true streamer pattern that flat out catches fish, both warm and cold water species. It deserves some space in every fly fisherman's fly box. Begin by picking up one of the long shank streamer hooks and getting it firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Then, load a bobbin with a spool of orange tying thread. Get the thread started on the hook shank behind the eye and take a few wraps rearward before snipping off the tag. Pick up the whole coil of solder wire by one end and measure a length just a bit longer than the hook, then snip it off. Place one end of the wire on top of the hook shank like so, and use a few tight turns of tying thread to lightly secure it. Pull the wire forward so only a small amount remains rearward of the thread wraps. Use wraps of tying thread to lock the wire down further, then make open spiral wraps down the hook shank, leaving the thread right at the start of the hook bend. Pull the wire back, but leave a little belly in it, about half a hook gap in height, and continue securing the wire with wraps of tying thread. Bend the wire up and down to break it off close. Carefully rotate both ends of the wire segment away from you and around to the underside of the hook shank so it looks like this. Take a few more thread wraps if necessary to make sure the wire's well anchored, and leave your tying thread there at the start of the hook bend. Pick up the hollow silver tubing and get hold of one of its ends. Measure and snip off a segment that's a full hook in length. Flip the tube around so the freshly snipped end points forward. Then slip the more frayed end around the hook eye and push it down the shank. With a little bit of frilly material extending past the hook bend, anchor the back end of the tubing with tight wraps of tying thread. The tubing's front end should reach to the back edge of the hook eye. Pick up the craft fur and with the backing side up, snip a nice straight 1/4 inch wide strip free. You should be left with something that looks about like this. With the fur canted back toward the rear of the fly, measure out a shank length of the backing, then transfer that measurement rearward to the start of the hook bend. Take 2 tight wraps of tying thread over top of the backing, then pull the material rearward and take 2 wraps around just the hook shank. Follow these with 2 more over top of the backing. Then once again, pull the strip back and take 2 wraps around just the hook shank. A large gap whip finish tool will make the next step a bit easier, but it can also be done with a regular whip finish tool. Complete a 4 or 5 turn whip finish right at the start of the hook bend, then seat the knot well and snip your tying thread free. To finish off the fly, load your bobbin with the black thread and get it started on the hook shank at the back edge of the hook eye. Once the thread's anchored, snip the excess tag off close. Push the tubing forward so wraps of tying thread will first corral, then lock down the ends. The body of the fly should now look something like this. Trim off close any of the frilly ends of the tubing that extend out over the hook eye and take a few more wraps of tying thread to clean the area up. Pull the craft fur strip forward out over the hook eye. Part the fur to create a little open space directly above your tying thread. Use your thread to firmly anchor the material to the top of the hook shank. When you're done, lift the craft fur up and snip the excess off close at the back edge of the hook eye. Use wraps of tying thread and a bit of trimming to clean the area up. Select a single saddle hackle feather and with the shiny side facing you, snip an inch or so off the bottom where the stem's pretty thick. Pull down a half dozen fibers on either side of the stem and trim them off to form a small triangular tie-in anchor. Place the anchor against the near side of the hook and take thread wraps to secure it, ending with your thread at the back edge of the hook eye. Get hold of the feather by its tip and bend the stem down through your fingers to fold the fibers rearward. Start taking touching wraps forward with the feather to build up an ample collar on the fly, then anchor the stem with tight wraps of tying thread. Once the stem's secured, reach in with your tying scissors and snip the excess off close. Pull any forward-pointing fibers rearward and take thread wraps to pin them back in that position. Trim any wayward fibers off close. Here, you can pick up just a regular whip finish tool and use it to do a couple of 5 or 6 turn whip finishes before seating the knots well and snipping your tying thread free. There's a lot of material anchored right at the head of the fly, so it's a good idea to use some head cement, here Sally Hansen hard as nails. Give the whole thread head a liberal coating, making sure none runs down into the hook eye. And that's the Zonker. Once the head cement dries, it's ready to fish.